Let's meet Lucy, our main character. We find her standing on a busy sidewalk outside a large office building in Taiwan. She's talking to a guy named Richard, and it's clear she's had a wild night of partying. Lucy looks a bit rough around the edges, her hair slightly messy and dark circles under her eyes. Despite her tired appearance, she's laughing and seems happy. Lucy is completely hungover and exhausted. All she wants to do is go home and rest before her classes the next day. But Richard has other plans. He keeps trying to convince Lucy to do him a favor. "Everything's gonna be fine," he keeps saying. "I just need you to take this inside." Richard explains that he has been here too many times over the last week and can be seen again, or look suspicious. The more we watch Richard, the more suspicious he seems. He comes off like a shady character, almost like a small-time criminal or a pimp. Lucy, on the other hand, seems like a carefree party girl who doesn't make the best choices when it comes to men. She's somewhat unimpressive at this moment, coming across as a bit of a pushover. It's easy to see why Richard picked her for this task. Deep down, we can sense that Lucy feels something might be off about this situation, but Richard keeps pushing and pushing. Finally, he takes out a briefcase and handcuffs it to Lucy. His arm. Lucy's demeanor changes instantly. She gets scared and angry, her eyes widening with fear. "Take this off me right now," she demands. But Richard ignores her pleas. With no other choice, Lucy walks into the building's front lobby. Her heart is racing, and she's visibly trembling. Being in Taiwan there is a language barrier that makes the situation even more stressful for her. The receptionist asks for her name in Taiwanese, but Lucy hesitates. She doesn't want to give her real name, but the receptionist wants to let it go. Finally, Lucy has to admit that her name is Lucy. Suddenly, guards seem to materialize out of thin air. They grab Lucy roughly, and she starts to panic in earnest. Through the glass doors of the lobby, she witnesses a horrifying sight. Richard, the man who got her into this mess, is shot right in front of her eyes. Blood splatters all over the glass, and Lucy lets out a terrified scream. The guards drag Lucy upstairs, her feet barely touching the ground as she struggles against their grip. They bring her to a room filled with men carrying guns. Lucy's eyes dart around frantically, looking for any way to escape, but there's none. Then Mr. Yang makes his entrance. He's clearly the boss, exuding an aura of terror and authority. What makes his appearance even more terrifying is that he emerges from a room filled with dead bodies. Lucy sees this and starts begging for her life, tears streaming down her face. But Mr. Yang simply sits down, his face an emotionless mask. The language barrier proves to be a major problem, so they call for a translator. Through the translator, Mr. Zhang orders Lucy to open the briefcase using a code she's been given. Everyone leaves the room, and Lucy is left alone with the briefcase. Her hands shaking, she reluctantly enters the code and opens it. Inside the briefcase, Lucy finds 4 large bags filled with brilliant blue rocks. It doesn't take a genius to realize these are drugs. To test the product, they bring in a junkie. The man snorts some of the blue substance and goes a little crazy, but he doesn't die. Then to Lucy's horror, they shoot the junkie right in front of her. Lucy thinks she aches next, her whole body trembling with fear. But instead of killing her, Mr. Zhang offers her a job. Before Lucy can even process this bizarre turn of events, they knock her unconscious. While all this drama is unfolding with Lucy, let's shift our focus to another important character, Professor Norman. We find him in a lecture hall, giving a brilliant presentation on cerebral capacity. The professor, with his distinguished appearance and captivating voice, has his students hanging on every word. Professor Norman explains that most humans only use about 10% of their brain's capacity. A select few individuals have managed to push a bit further, but not by much. He then shares an interesting fact. Dolphins use about 20% of their brain capacity, which is how they develop their impressive sonar communication abilities. The professor speaks with eloquence and deep knowledge. It's clear that he has devoted his entire life to studying the human brain and its potential. His passion for the subject shines through in every word, making even the most complex concepts seem fascinating and accessible to his students. Let's check back in on Lucy. She wakes up in a dingy room, feeling worse than she has ever felt in her life. Her stomach is wrapped in bandages and she can see surgical marks on her skin. As she becomes more aware, she notices bloody gauze nearby. With growing horror, Lucy realizes that either her organs have been removed or she has been turned into a drug mule. Before Lucy can fully process what's happened to her, guards burst into the room. They roughly escort her to the lobby, where she meets an English-speaking man. This man, speaking rapidly and with an air of routine, explains the situation to Lucy and several other scared-looking individuals. He tells them that they have all been implanted with bags of drugs in their stomachs. They are being sent to different countries where the drugs will be removed. The man delivers this shocking news as if he is reading a grocery list, which makes the whole situation even more terrifying. He warns them all that if they try to run or don't follow instructions, their families will be killed. Lucy is stammering, her mind struggling to grasp the enormity of what's happening to her. The casual way the Englishman delivers this life-altering news makes him seem even scarier and more believable. Everyone in the group looks terrified, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. Just as Lucy thinks things can, to get any worse, Mr. Jang appears and hands her a drink. Too scared to refuse, Lucy downs it in one gulp. Almost immediately, she feels herself losing consciousness. Meanwhile, back in the lecture hall, Professor Norman is diving deeper into his fascinating topic. He explains that humans procreate not just to continue the species, but to pass on the knowledge we've accumulated to the next generation. This way, our understanding of the world progresses with each new generation. His students are completely engrossed as he speaks about this divine right of knowledge that is continuously handed down through the generations. If the habitat is favorable, he says, they will choose to reproduce. Lucy regains consciousness in a concrete room that looks like it hasn't been cleaned in years. She's barely had time to get her bearings when an impatient-looking man enters. He demands the drugs, but Lucy, still confused and scared, doesn't understand what he wants. Frustrated, the man starts beating Lucy, kicking her repeatedly before leaving her curled up on the floor. But this violent act sets off an unexpected chain reaction in Lucy's body. The bag of drugs inside her has ruptured, releasing its contents directly into her system. What happens next is nothing short of miraculous and terrifying. Lucy's nerves and cells start exploding with activity. The pain is excruciating, and Lucy finds herself crawling up the walls and across the ceiling as her body fights to adapt to this new stimulus. Her eyes, once a normal human color, now shine with the same brilliant blue as the drug rocks. As this is happening to Lucy, let's revisit what the professor said earlier. He stated that no human has ever reached 20% of their brain capacity. But as we watch Lucy's transformation, it seems she's just blown past that mark. In his lecture, the professor goes on to explain what might happen if humans could access more of their brain power. At 40% capacity, he theorizes, we might be able to control other people and objects around us. We could potentially develop abilities like telekinesis, moving things with our minds. But the professor is quick to point out that this is all hypothetical. As far as he knows, it's not humanly possible to reach such high levels of cerebral capacity. There's no way to study the science behind these what-ifs because it's just not a possibility in the real world. A curious student raises their hand and asks, what would happen if we ever reach 100% cerebral access? The professor pauses, considering the question. Finally, he admits,
I have no idea.
Back in the concrete room, Lucy has been sitting quietly, lost in thought as her brain and body catch up to each other. She is awakened in a way no other human has ever experienced before. When the angry man from earlier returns, Lucy barely seems to notice him at first. But then, something remarkable happens. Lucy, now operating at a much higher level of brain capacity, makes quick work of taking down not just the angry man, but everyone else who tries to stop her. She moves with a speed and precision that seems almost superhuman. As Lucy escapes into the city, she realizes she can feel, hear, and sense everything around her with incredible clarity. Even more surprisingly, she discovers she can now understand and speak other languages fluently without ever having studied them. Lucy makes her way to a hospital, driven by an instinct she doesn't fully understand yet. She walks into a surgical room, quickly assesses the patient on the table, and realizes they are not going to survive anyway. Without hesitation, she ends the patient, who is alive, then turns to the shocked surgical team. With a calm authority that brooks no argument, Lucy insists that the surgical team remove the drugs from her stomach immediately. As they begin the impromptu surgery, Lucy does something unexpected. She calls her mom on the phone. This phone call is both touching and unsettling. Lucy tells her mom that she can feel and see everything now. She can remember every moment of her life, from her birth until now. She describes how she can feel the air moving around her, sense the pull of gravity, and perceive the vast expanse of space. As she talks, Lucy starts crying, seeming to realize that she's changing in ways she can reverse. The scene is incredibly sad because we can tell this isn't the same carefree Lucy we met at the beginning of the story. She's trying to say goodbye to her old life and her mother, but she can't fully explain what's happening to her. Her mom, understandably, is confused and worried. As the doctor removes the bag of drugs from Lucy's stomach, his eyes widen in recognition. This is CPH4, he says, his voice filled with awe and fear. He explains that CPH4 is a synthetic version of 3A hormone that pregnant women produce naturally in the 6th week of pregnancy. The doctor goes on to describe the drug's effects in more detail. It provides the fetus with all the information and substances it needs to grow and develop. Lucy listens to this explanation, understanding dawning in her eyes. She realizes that this powerful substance is now coursing through her veins, awakening parts of her brain that have been dormant her entire life. With this knowledge comes the grim understanding that she won't be able to live long in this state. She'll have to either fully embrace this change or succumb to it entirely. In that moment, Lucy makes a decision. She needs to take care of unfinished business, and she needs to do it fast. With a newfound sense of purpose, Lucy returns to the high-rise office building where her ordeal began. As she makes her way through the building, she leaves a trail of unconscious, or possibly dead, bodies in her wake. Her movements are precise and efficient. Nothing like the scared party girl we met at the beginning of the story. When Lucy finally reaches Mr. Zhang's lair, she doesn't hesitate. She quickly overpowers him, and in a move that shocks even herself, she stabs Mr. Yang's hands to the arms of his chair. But Lucy doesn't stop there. In a bizarre and unsettling scene, she seems to reach into Mr. Zhang's mind and extract information directly from his brain. Through this strange mind meld, Lucy learns the locations where the other drug mules are being sent. She realizes that to fully unlock her brain, its potential, and share this knowledge with the world, she'll need all of the CPH4. It's become her mission, and she knows she has to act fast. Interestingly, Lucy doesn't kill Mr. Zhang. Perhaps some part of her thinks he might still be useful later. Or perhaps, with her expanding consciousness, she's moved beyond the desire for simple revenge. Lucy returns to her apartment, but she is not the same person who left it just a day ago. Her roommate is shocked by Lucy's appearance and demeanor. Without explaining, Lucy gives her roommate some quick medical advice about a condition the roommate hadn't even mentioned. Then Lucy turns her attention to the internet. What happens next is astonishing. Lucy begins to read and absorb information at an inhuman speed. Her eyes dart back and forth across the screen faster than should be possible, and she seems to be processing and understanding everything instantly. She focuses particularly on the published works of Professor Norman, reading everything he's ever written in a matter of minutes. Armed with this knowledge, Lucy decides to contact Professor Norman directly. When he answers the phone, he's understandably confused. Lucy tries to explain who she is and what has happened to her, but the professor is skeptical. Who would it be? To prove she's telling the truth, Lucy does something incredible. She appears simultaneously on the professor's TV, phone, and laptop. It's as if she become part of the electronic world itself. The professor is astonished and fascinated, his skepticism quickly turning to excitement. Lucy asks the professor a profound question. What should she do with all this knowledge and power? The professor, drawing on his years of study and the lecture he just gave, gives her a simple answer.
Pass it on.
Just as he said in his lecture, the purpose of our existence is to acquire knowledge and pass it on to future generations. With her mission clear, Lucy knows she needs to get her hands on the remaining CPH4. Despite her incredible new abilities, she still has to travel like a normal person. Lucy gets dressed up and uses her new abilities to change her appearance, making herself unrecognizable. She boards a plane, drawing as little attention to herself as possible. Once on board, Lucy works feverishly on her laptop. She's now using 40% of her brain capacity, and it's clear that her mind is starting to take control of her body in ways she never imagined possible. As Lucy works, she grows increasingly impatient with the world around her. Everything and everyone seems to be moving in slow motion compared to the speed of her thoughts. She barely has time for the flight attendant's instructions about seatbelts and tray tables. Meanwhile, Lucy makes contact with a police officer named Pierre. She explains about the drugs and tells him she will need all of them once they're captured. Lucy provides detailed information about who the other drug mules are and where they can be found. Pierre seems completely lost, struggling to keep up with Lucy, his rapid-fire delivery of information, but Lucy is very persuasive. She's operating on a level that Pierre can barely comprehend, but he finds himself agreeing to help her. As the flight progresses, Lucy starts to experience some alarming physical changes. Her teeth begin to fall out, and her body seems to be fighting against the massive changes happening in her brain. It's just as the professor predicted. The human body can only handle so much, and Lucy's brain is overriding her body, its natural functions. In a moment of desperation, Lucy realizes she needs more of the CPH4 to stabilize her condition. She retrieves the drugs that were removed from her body at the hospital and begins to consume them at an alarming rate. She eats the blue crystals like they are potato chips, barely pausing to breathe between handfuls. The effect is immediate and startling. Lucy's body begins to stabilize, but then something even stranger happens. Her physical form starts to break apart, turning into what looks like grains of black sand. For a moment, it seems like Lucy has disappeared entirely. While Lucy is going through her transformation, Pierre and his fellow officers are busy tracking down the other drug mules. Following Lucy, as detailed instructions, they manage to locate and apprehend all of the carriers. They take them to the hospital to have the drugs surgically removed. When Lucy reappears, she finds herself in the same hospital. She's now operating at 50% of her brain capacity, and her demeanor has changed dramatically. She's focused, almost machine-like in her efficiency. Lucy knows she needs all of the drugs, and she is willing to do whatever it takes to get them. Lucy makes her way through the hospital, easily overpowering anyone who tries to stop her. She finds Pierre and makes it clear that she needs his help. Lucy demonstrates her new abilities, showing Pierre that he can either help her willingly or she will use her powers to make him cooperate. It's worth noting how much Lucy has changed at this point. She's no longer the emotional, scared girl we met at the beginning. Her increased intelligence seems to have stripped away her anxieties and fears. There's no longer any unknown for her to be afraid of. She can understand and predict everything around her. This new Lucy is calm, focused, and utterly determined to complete her mission. Lucy and Pierre leave the hospital, heading toward the location where the other drug mules are being treated. As they drive, Lucy explains more about what's happening to her and what she needs to do. Pierre listens, struggling to comprehend the incredible story he's hearing. Suddenly, their car is attacked. Mr. Zhang's men have caught up with them, determined to retrieve the drugs and eliminate Lucy. What follows is an intense car chase through the busy streets of the city. Lucy, with her enhanced mental capabilities, is able to predict and avoid their attackers, moves with uncanny accuracy. During the chase, Lucy uses her newfound abilities to control traffic lights, change electronic road signs, and even manipulate other drivers on the road. It's a display of power that leaves Pierre speechless. Despite the danger, Lucy remains calm, her mind working at incredible speeds to keep them safe and moving towards their goal. As they near the hospital where the other drug mules are being held, Lucy senses that Mr. Zhang's men are closing in. She knows they'll arrive at almost the same time, turning the hospital into a potential battleground. Lucy and Pierre arrive at the hospital just as Mr. Zhang's men are about to leave with all the recovered drugs. In a display of her growing powers, Lucy steps out of the car and faces the armed men without fear. She raises her hand and suddenly the men find themselves floating in the air, their weapons torn from their grasps. It's a breathtaking demonstration of telekinesis, exactly what Professor Norman had theorized about higher brain function. Lucy calmly walks through the floating, struggling men and retrieves all the drugs. The ease with which she handles this dangerous situation shows just how far she's come from the scared party girl we met at the beginning. Before they leave, Lucy turns to Pierre and kisses him. But it's clear that this is more of a gesture of gratitude than any real emotional connection. Lucy has moved beyond human emotions at this point. She's focused entirely on her mission to unlock the full potential of her brain and pass on the knowledge she's gaining. Lucy and Pierre go to meet Professor Norman at his college. They tell everyone to be careful because Mr. Zhang is following them. The professors all want to ask Lucy questions. She tells them everything she knows now. She's using about 60% of her brain. While they're talking, Mr. Zhang and his men are fighting with the police in the hallway. There's a big gunfight going on. Lucy shows the professors what she's learned. She says it all comes down to time. She says we have taken all our knowledge and made it small so we can understand it. We can handle knowing everything at once. Lucy says time is the only proof that we exist. Without time, we don't exist. She says she needs to take all the rest of the drugs so she can discover what happens at 100% brain use. She wants to pass that knowledge on to everyone. The professors hook Lucy up to IVs and start giving her all the drugs at once. As she takes them, she starts to turn into a black slime. She enters every electronic device around her and starts to build a super smart computer. Lucy travels back in time in her mind. She sees the 1800s, then the time of the dinosaurs, all the way back to the beginning of life. She's completely calm while all this is happening. While Lucy is doing this, all the bad guys have died. The room has turned into a white space where Lucy's computer is coming to life. The professors are confused, but Professor Norman is fascinated. This is what he's been studying his whole life. In the real world, Mr. Zhang is pointing a gun at Lucy. He is moving in slow motion. Lucy is so lost in her journey through time that she doesn't see him. When the gun goes off, Lucy disappears. She's become one with the universe. Her clothes fall to the floor, empty. Pierre kills Mr. Zhang. Everyone looks around, confused. They are all asking, "Where's Lucy?" A black slime hand gives Professor Norman a small computer drive. It has everything Lucy learned on it. Then all the black slime that was Lucy disappears. Lucy is now everywhere. She says this Earth was given to us 1 billion years ago. She asks, what have we done with it? What will we do with it now that we have all this information? If you enjoy the video, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments section the next movie I will recap for you.